Hey, Kulu!
What?
Did you know?
Well, what did I know?
Did you know?
What are you asking me?
Did you know?
What did I know?
That you were almost fluffy! Hello, my fellow hunters, and today we look to alternate reality, where monsters that we know and love could have ended up, well, very different from how they did. This is a cavalcade of new monsters that perhaps still might see the light of day in future Monster Hunter games that we play. So I say, let's have some fun and talk about them. And by them, I mean, for example, Dodo Gamma was almost horrific. Look at that! It looks like Devil Joe picked him up and kept him in his mouth for way too long, and then behold, Dodo Joe Devil Gamma is born! It really is quite freaky, but it's fun to see what they were exploring. Even the more lizard-like one behind, with the frills coming out, the spiked belly, is really interesting to me. How they get to the end design we actually fight is simply fascinating, and I do like to imagine that this guy was a lot more aggressive, a lot less docile. He very much actively seeked the player, and this one looks like a monster that is much higher than a tier 1, kind of just there to fill out the environment. Not that I mean that in any negative way. Those monsters are important. You need the small fry to make the big fry, well, big fry, and this is really cool to see. You could totally have the rocks that he fire be infused with a little bit of dragon energy to make a lovely miniature dragon fire meteor storm flamed out of his gut. But, you know, that's the example aside. Let's focus on Mr. Kutku, who, as I said, was almost so goddamn fluffy. Like, look at that head. Kinda looks like a rufflet, if I'm completely honest. Imagine seeing that wandering around, especially with that tail. It looks like your classic rabbit poofy ball tail on the end of quite the thick trunk-like appendage. Thick trunk-like appendage. I just didn't want to say tail again, so I went with thick trunk-like appendage. Hey girl, you want to see my thick trunk-like appendage? I'm gonna stop! But what I will say is, how about we play Spot the Odd One Out? Look at that! Look at the other designs! The amount that have been churned through in order to get, well, what we ended up with. Now, a lot of these kind of look more pooky-y, and I am very tempted to say that they are. I'm not quite sure why a Kuliyaku one got mixed in, but wow. I love the flowery theme. Having the tail that is just an opening flower, you could totally see him very still blended in to the jungle camouflage. The flower tail just gently hovering, and then when something comes to sup nectar from it, a little bird or maybe a slightly larger animal, it closes round them, and thus it eats bugs with its tail. But then we have the much more, like, evilly, dark, decrepit looking one that sticks more to the shadows. You could see being much more nocturnal, perhaps even a Rotten Veil variation that was tried out. Or the one at the bottom, which looks like it's just freshly walked out of dark, murky water. Again, perhaps in the Rotten Veil, if there was water that isn't acid, and it's there licking its tongue before lashing it at you, a lot more savage and quick, and it's just amazing to see the variation we could have got from just one monster. And honestly, the main thing all of these do for me is make me think that we should get subspecies that are so much more different to each other. A lot of the time it's basically just color, right? And a moveset change, sure, but the differences, if you really look at it, are minor. But imagine having such vastly different creatures that all all are technically pooky. Now, you do kind of end up in a world where it's so different that it might as well be its own monster. Like, you can't say Levisioth is just a subspecies of Plesioth that lives in lava, it's its own creature, so it's where do you draw the line that it's similar enough to be a subspecies, while not different enough to just be classified as its own creature. I mean, even members of the same literal life cycle are classified as different creatures sometimes in Monster Hunter. Zeno, Safi, Magala, Shagaru, Magala, so I suppose that line tends to be blurred fairly often. But if you had Pookie and the quest for it was in the forest, then it looks like the one that we know. But if you had Pookie and the quest was in the desert, then perhaps, you know, it looks like that friendly face.
Hello!
Like, I suppose, a bit more extreme example of our own creatures, such as African elephant to Asian elephant. They're both very clearly elephants. You're not going to classify them as different whole animals, but they are very physically different when you get down to it. The Asian elephant isn't just like blue, but otherwise identical to the African. Then again, having bright blue elephants would be... I digress. Either way, I love the idea of perhaps bringing back some of these concepts, but then again, they were thrown away for a reason, and I trust the decision making, though. Imagine if Kula Yaku looked like this! Which is much more intimidating almost. It's much more vicious, much more built for speed. You can kind of just see the momentum, the long flowy feathers powered back by the wind as he just absolutely guns it away from the nest. This one inspires vibes of just full on. Whereas the Kulu we got is a little bit more kind of, you know, friendlier almost, sillier, a little bit more perhaps appropriate for such a low tier monster. But seeing this makes me think that perhaps in future you could take something low tier, give it a little bit of a tune up and have a Elder Dragon level variant that just looks ferocious, or perhaps even whatever this is. But no, we're not just here for Kula Yaku. Did you know that Palumu, yes you, was almost a platypus? I know! Look at it! Why is this not the final design? It's so much, I don't care what you say, it's so much better. Because platypuses are mental. What are they? I mean, really? You have a mammal with a beak, with webbed feet, that lays eggs, that is somehow venomous. I mean, it's just...
Well, we have a few bits left over. Shall we make a new animal? Oh, I guess just throw them all together. Oh, look at it. I guess I'll call it Platypus. Oh, that's a silly name.
I just adore it. It is one of Mother Nature's greatest and weirdest creations. I just, So when you take that and put it into monster form, you could give it all manner of things. Poison, of course, being one of them, but you could essentially just tool this monster to do anything and go, it's the platypus of Monster Hunter, so it can do all of the things monsters can do. Have fun! And I think that's just a wondrous little design. It really is an animal that deserves it. It just is fantastic. And I adore knowing that it so very nearly happened. So, you know, maybe once we get Leviathans back, once we start maybe dipping our toe back into water, oh, hopefully it comes back round. What do you think about that, Palumu? Okay, fine. Let's talk Banbaro! Who honestly almost looked so much more badass than he actually ended up looking. I mean, really, I love the shaggy fur, I love the shape of the horns, the almost more compact feel that he had there, the hair actually shown to just be flowing around him as he moves, as he charges, that central horn being much more potent. He suddenly looks like a much more aggressive creature that is a lot more threatening than he turned out to be, though he is quite potent for a tier 1 monster, arguably the most potent, only really competing, I would say, with Anjanath. But it's that red shaded one that gets me, because if you imagine him as fire, right? You've got embers and coals burning away in his fur, kind of like Teostra Mane, but full body. And as he gets angry, it sort of almost does the floaty, ethereal, powery look that Kirin Mane does, as it seems like it's almost underwater. The hair's just wafting back and forth, the static making it stand on end and look beautiful. But that across the whole Bambaro as he's charging towards you? How intimidating would that be? But no, we got our endlessly traveling friend, and you know what? I'm okay with that too, because he's beautiful, but he really could have ended up being a lot more vicious looking. Talking of looking very differently, let's talk Namiel. Or more accurately, let's talk Magala? Namigala. Either way, we almost had a much plainer, smoother, in the very literal smooth sense, looking dragon of the sea. Very much using the Nergy/Gore skeleton, and very different. I can't see this. If I'm completely honest, I am not the biggest fan of that look. It works for Magala and Shagaru because they are one colour, in one case really dark so it hides specific shape well, and in the other case really bright, so that kind of makes it blur and merge together too. But when you have this kind of neutral colouring, that kind of body look to me is just almost like it's missing details, missing features. It looks weird. It's not the kind of way you want to see our favourite sea dragon, who is probably my second or first favourite new Iceborne monster, and easily in my top 10 of all time. So yeah, I'm glad this one didn't stick, though the idea of a watery frenzy would be quite amusing. A plague of angry water. Okay, maybe not as amusing as I first thought it would, but even with all of that lit up and glowing like she tends to do, I just can't see it. You need those graceful movements, that almost squid-like appearance. It just... even if I was to say, forget the Namiel connection, just make this a new monster, it just doesn't have a lot that makes me excited. So that's a little bit of a shame, but I suppose that's very much the point of concept art, to arrive at the design that is the one that you're like, yes. And when Namiel's final design was shown, I was like, yes. So, that's basically just what I wanted to talk about today, a few of these little choice concept arts, and see what we could have got. There is just so many of them, and they're so wonderful to go over and imagine, and if you did like this, I'd love to do it a few more times, bring you some more, like, for example, Velkhana almost had antlers. I don't know what to do with that information, but I feel like we should do something, you know? So, alright, let me know what you thought. Let me know what you think this almost was. Like, my word! We'll talk about that next time. And until that next time, like you enjoyed this, subscribe for more. A goodbye.
Rage Gaming with the video float.
But that's all that's really relevant at the mo, but I'm still gonna leave this up so you patrons know that I love you, even though the outro's no longer that kind of relevant. But the new one's being worked on, and it's gonna be a truly badass song, and don't worry, I won't be doing any rapping on it. I'm gonna go now. This was shit. Kulu!